Melody, and this is Berry Creative Lighting.
I'm Justin, her artesian roadie, and today we're going to talk about what it is to be an art show vendor.
Yeah, what you said.
So, when we talk about being an artist, what is the business we're talking about?
Well, selling art.
And how do you sell your art?
Well, you can either do it in galleries, or what I've done it mostly is at art shows, and they're all around the country, always going on, and I mainly do them in California, Nevada, and here in Arizona.
And a great show in New Mexico.
Oh, and an awesome show in New Mexico.
Now, we were talking about it, and I think there's 4 elements in picking a product to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of those elements?
I think it's desire to make the item. There's also finding the supplies to make that item, and
Well, the other thing was the cost. It has to be cheaper to make it than what it takes that people are willing to buy it for.
well, we also have to the understand the business part of being an artist, because you have to make money. I mean, the whole thing about being a starving artist is a thing, but there's a part where you have to make enough money so you can pay your mortgage and eat that night.
Yeah, we're not starving artists because I have a platinum stomach. And then the final one, and we've come across this with a number of your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to transport it.
Oh.
Depending on the type of item, some items are very fragile, and if you create an item that you have to pack so carefully and you need a large vehicle and you can only take so few, that won't successfully work at an art show. And so understanding that it will. Well, what is a great example of what we decided we couldn't keep taking to art shows?
Floor lamps.
Floor lamps.
I love floor lamps. They're an awesome item for me to do, but they would take up so much room in the van, and it just the cost to hold it, to ship it, and then a few of my lamps in just transporting them have broken, so I can't sell them, but then I have to take them home, so they have to take up. Yeah, it's been fun.
So when coming up with your ideas, you have to keep those elements in mind. If it can't meet those goals, you're going to struggle to be successful in selling them. Now, you at this point come up with a brilliant idea. How do you find out where to sell them?
That was a very good question. It was a very good question the first time I asked it. I Googled it. I found Facebook groups to find it. That's what they do. I'm in a group, Art Reviews, I think it was called. There's over 11,000 artists in there, and they tell me, how the show went, how the show didn't go, where to go, how, and that's pretty much how we figured it out. But there's websites and there's things like that.
So I find a show I want to be in, and I just pay my money, and then I can set up?
No.
Oh,
you have to apply to the show, and then you have to pay a jury fee. They have jurors that go through everybody, and they go through and they grade you, and how you're graded is who gets to go in. They might not have like 20 jewelers and 20 painters and 20 glass people, and they have to keep it balanced because you don't want to go to a show going joy, 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 because then it just you can't see everybody. So they want to break it up. So they try to keep it balanced.
Okay. And I'm assuming, I mean, you're really just, sitting on a park or a public street for 2 days, so that's got to be what, $50 for a show fee?
Oh, funny man. The last show I paid for was for Liberty Station for a 10 by 20 booth, which is pretty much two tents that are 10 by 10. Was $940. That's not the least expensive. That does not include electricity, and sometimes they charge you more for that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and that can be anywhere from $50 to $75 just to have electricity. I need electricity. So, I mean, that's what I have to pay just for the joy of sitting there in the street waiting for adorable people to come and buy my pretty things.
And so, is there any way of knowing which show you should pick or shouldn't pick? I mean, how do you know? I mean, that's a lot of money to spend, and if you don't know, you're gonna do okay.
Well, sometimes you have to do a little bit of homework. You kind of have to go back to the whole Facebook thing of artist reviews and what they think, and there's actually review sites that are out there that kind of go from that. They kind of tell you about how many people show up, and that's how I usually know. And sometimes I just get from somebody that's sitting next to me at a booth, and they go, "Oh, you have to do this show," and you go, "Okay, that makes sense." So you have to kind of, some of it word of mouth, some of you look online, and definitely Facebook groups.
Now, is there some specific elements for your shows that you look for to determine whether or not it's a show worth you doing?
Well, I personally like to do shows at least 100,000 people or more, or somewhere between 10 to 15,000 people that they assume that are going to show up. I also don't like to do shows usually that's been around for a while. And
you do like to do shows.
I do shows. I do like the shows that's been around for a while, but I don't, and that's pretty much how I specifically pick on shows. And again, if they have electricity, that definitely puts my ears up, because if we kind of go into the evening, I glow.
Okay, so at this point, we have our product. We know where we found someone who's going to let us set up a booth, and we paid our booth fee. How does setup work?
Well, I usually have a Mai Tai and I watch him do all the work. No.
She's not joking.
Well, what we usually do is usually they give you your booth number. Sometimes you pick it, sometimes you don't, and then you pick your booth number, and sometimes they guide you.
Well, even before that, when we first pull up, what do you have to do? So we have to find the check-in.
I have to find the check-in. That's where I was going. I have to find the check-in to say, "Hey, we're here, and is my booth still where you want my booth? Did you move me? Which way are we facing? That type of thing." That's what the information that the people that run the show are going to give me, and then I can go, okay, where's the bathroom, and where's my booth,
and where's parking,
and then where do we park? Because we want the patrons to come in and park as close as possible. So sometimes at a couple of shows, we actually had to park way far away, so so the patrons would come in. The one show we do in Boulder City, they actually bus people in. Boulder City Art in the Park, October 2nd and 3rd. Usually.
All right, and so that and then they'll give you your load-in procedures, and
Usually.
usually, and well, that's near the check-in. Like, where do you park to load in? Um, and I've lost my complete thought of where I was going with that. Where's the load-in procedures? Oh, and what's the timing of this?
Oh, usually it's like the day before. Like if we start on a Friday, we're usually on Thursday night, and that's like about 9 o'clock is when we're usually setting up. Um, Sometimes they break it up, but usually about 9 o'clock is when 9 o'clock the day before, or even when we do a Saturday Sunday show, we usually set up all day Friday. They give us all day. Take your time, do what you need to do. Sometimes you can pull up to the booth. Sometimes you have to park and truck your stuff up the hill, um, and that's where we are.
Okay, and then so for us, when we load in, we have our booth. We're parked where we need to park. And then what do we do after that?
We take everything out.
And then our setup procedure. What is our goal on setup day?
Usually setup day is we get the tent up, we put the weights on, we put the tables on, we put the curtains up, we put the sides up. Usually prior to us even setting up, because we kind of know how the setup's going to be when we get there, and kind of go, okay, is this going to work? We have our little Legos that we kind of go, okay, this is kind of where we want the tents.
And we will be detailing this when we do our booth setup video.
But it's definitely adorable because I loved it. And that's how we're going to set up, and that's where we're going to go. And we get sometimes we set up pull out lamps out of the tote, sometimes we don't. It just depends on the show. If it's an inside show, we don't have to worry about tent. Usually we pull lamps at that point.
Or weather.
Or weather.
Yeah, well, weather is always an issue to be concerned about. So that's our load-in process. So it's the day before. We have all the product. We've set up the booth. We may or may not have completely set up the product. And do we just stay there all night?
No, they usually have security. Some of the jewelers, most of the jewelers, they usually take everything back. They just set up the booth, and then they come back and they set up all the jewelry. They do have security, so we're able to have everything up, and then we just kind of quote unquote close the doors, and we're good to go.
Okay, and then in our so we have our booth set up, and then it's show day. What's our typical procedure? I mean, how does show day begin?
Well, usually shows start anywhere between 9 and 10, and we usually get there around 7, 8, depending on the show start. And then we kind of make sure that all the lamps are good to go. We make sure that everything's charged. We make sure, and how the flow of the booth is what. So usually that's what we do in the morning, and then we kind of, sometimes they let the people in, sometimes they don't, and then I'm nervous until my first show. First sell.
And then that brings up the next part, the sales process. Just the overall, what's it like to sell at an art show?
It's the way we've done shows is that you pay me. Some of the shows, they have kind of a central place, but the way that we work it is that you pay me, and his mom was a glass blower, and he used to do shows when he was younger, and so he kind of knows that we need to do credit cards, and we use Square. And again, we'll go back into depths of which cards to use, at least which ones we use. And do you use credit card, do you not use credit card, do you take checks, or how the whole money situation pans out, and how you interact with a person. There's times where I have to kind of practice. I'm going like, okay, what am I going to say to people? How am I going to say this to people? And then I actually had to write myself a script to kind of go, okay, this makes sense. And again, it's all trial and error.
Well, and there's also the balance. We would try to make a real effort to greet everyone who comes from the booth. We look to offer to show them pieces about the lamp, elements that she's created. We try to be aware of if the person just wants to look and absorb. And our goal is to make ourselves present for whoever's looking. And we always offer up to show features and show off the lamps regardless if they're making a purchase, and we always reinforce that. I mean, ideally, yes, we want to sell every lamp we brought, but our goal is to make an inviting space where we can talk, and maybe right at the moment they won't purchase a lamp, but in the future we can hope to able to help them. Now, one thing that always comes up: business cards. The idea of putting business cards out. Well, why don't you describe how we've dealt with that?
I believe in business cards. There is a part where we used to leave the business cards out in front, and people would just walk by and grab them and not really interact with us. But then, if you don't interact with us, how can I make a sale, or how can I have a conversation if I just have you grab my card to just walk away? So I have them, but you have to ask for them, which means you actually talk to me. Hey, do you have a card? Of course I have a card. Here you go. And I say, if you have any questions, my number's on. Then I give them information. And in my particular card, I have my email, my address, my email, my phone number, and my website all on there. So there's a lot of information there. And but I still think having business cards is a good thing. There's also some that actually just put a picture of one and you just take it with your phone, and then you don't have to worry about losing the card.
Yeah, so the big thing we found was that we were going through a ton of video cards with little response when we just left them out publicly. But when we did keep them, that it was people requesting them, the response rate went up dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've gone through the entire show process. At the end of the day, it's the same as like the first day after setup. We close up the booth. Now we're on the last day of the show, and depending how well the show went will depend how excited we are. We're on the last day of the show. To talk about some of the challenges of the loadout when you're closing down.
The one thing is that it depends on the show. Some you have to be completely broken down as physically possible. Then they'll let you come and get the car, or it's kind of catch all. Whenever you come in. But you also have to be aware of other people. You can't park in people's spaces. You can't park in and it's like they want to get out as quick just as much as I want to get quick. But we know it takes us at least 2 hours to break down our booth, and that's on a good day.
Well, we have it down to a procedure, but yes, it is a very long teardown. And so I think that's the one takeaway is patience. Patience for everyone involved in the process. That is where we've seen tempers frayed the most. Someone pulling in someone's spot, someone just not being thoughtful of everyone else trying to load out. You will make so many more friends if you are thoughtful of other vendors trying to close up and get their process done as well. It definitely runs smoother when everyone is thoughtful of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then what do we usually do after a show?
Well, we kind of analyze.
At a good dinner, because we are not going to be starving artists.
we usually analyze what I sold and not really who I sold it to, but kind of what exactly I sold. Did I sell this many tiny tubes? What color did I sell? Um, and and then I can kind of go, all right, now what I'm going to do the next lamp, and that's kind of what we did, and where the sales were compared to last time I did this show, and that's again that's a trending, and what color seems to go, at least for me, than anything else.
Okay. And so that's the whole base process of being an art show vendor. Um, Now, to talk about some of the stuff you do in between shows, your business processes.
Oh, the tax part. that I usually do all my tax stuff at the beginning of the month, and first of the month, that's when I do my taxes, and then each show, depending on what state you're in, you have to do taxes per show, and you have to do your own state taxes. I am not a tax professional. I'm just saying this is what I do. I do not, that's what they do. It's not what I do.
We refer to your accountant or your own tax information for your particular situation.
But it's something you have to do. And then I'm thinking about what show can I do? Did I hear about a show at this show to go to the next show? And then I think we've said it that in order for you to do a show in the fall, you have to sign up for it in the spring. And it's just, some are actually a year ahead of time. Sometimes you have to be on the waiting list. And you just get it, but it also, you don't want to do show after show after show after show. At least I don't, because it takes time for me to do these. So I have to kind of keep that in mind of, okay, I need this many lamps. How many lamps can I do before this show? And supplies and everything else.
And then it's prep for the next show.
This is based on what I sold and what I heard other people like. Well, I would have liked this lamp if it was green with pink polka dots. I'm like, okay, well, I can make you one, but if all my blues went, I'm like, oh, I guess it must be a blue day, so I'll do more blue, and I kind of base my next lamp on what I sold at the last show.
So I think we've described the entire process of being an art show vendor.
Mm-hmm.
All of these different things, we plan episodes to go in detail on each specific item, but we just wanted to do the broad outline. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Any stories?
Which story?
I don't have a specific one. We've done a lot of shows. There's a lot of stories.
Well, the biggest thing I want to share.
Actually, your first show. Describe your first show.
My first show. Oh, mine too.
And I wouldn't name names.
No, I'm not going to name names. This is the show. I'm going to show you this picture. I was all over the place. I had paintings. I had flowerings, and that's what I did. I showed up. And I'm like, okay. And we're looking at the sky, and it's going gray, gray, gray. It went black. And everybody's going, we need to go home. The director?
Show promoter,
thank you. The show promoter said, no, you can't leave. Well, if you leave, you'll be blackballed. That's my first show. I don't want to be blackballed at my first show. And I put all my paintings away because I didn't want them to get wet. And then we ended up putting everything away and packing. And our neighbor, who is a jeweler, who's done this a bazillion years, tent fell apart because of the
what
rain.
Was it that hit us? What weather?
It was a monsoon.
It was hail.
It was hail. Oh my goodness.
Black Friday weekend. Woo! And it was hail.
And so we had hail, we had rain, and I'm like, oh, and so we got our stuff in. We're not going to leave anybody hanging. We're all kind of in this together, and we decided to help this lady next to us. And I'm standing there holding up the side of her tent so she can get her stuff out, and the rain is going down my arm.
Cold, wet rain.
The only thing that absolutely saved us, we weren't that far from home. So that was nice. And Starbucks was definitely in our future. We helped her get in the car, and I'm like, this is what I want to do for a living.
And that show, I assume it went really well financially. How much did you make at that show?
$76.
And was that before or after show fee?
No, that was before show fee.
Yes, because how much did you have to? You had to give her a percentage, didn't you?
$7.60.
We never did her show again.
No. But again, I learned from that show. I did. Strangely enough, I did. And I'm like, okay, I did a show. No idea what I'm doing. I jumped in the water. Literally. And I have to try. I have no idea. Sometimes you just don't know absolutely everything. I mean, as much planning as we can do, it's going to rain. The wind's going to be nasty, so.
So, we hope this gives you a nice overview and what you're in for if you decide to do art shows. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and we look forward to reading them. Thank you.